Welcome back to part two. I'm interviewing Cliff Hughes about his personal trading. Cliff, we're just talking about the read acrosses, as you said, between your work life and trading. What about sometimes the erratic nature of work in that it's not always a continuous thing?
Oh no, definitely not. No. Well, that has pluses and minuses. I mean, firstly, most TV production happens in the evenings. So generally speaking, once something is up and running, we won't actually go in very early in the mornings. We'll probably go in about mid-morning, perhaps even slightly later to a show, because we'll be working until 11, midnight, something like that. So I have quite often quite a lot of time in the mornings, which is when you probably see me in the room quite a bit. And so I can, that's a good thing, because I've got a kind of regimented routine that so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I sit in the room for a while and I look at the charts and I try and work out what I think is going to be something worth trading. So that's a good thing, I think. But then the erratic nature of it means that sometimes, you're right, I can be the other side of the world, or I can be, you know, in Manchester, or I can be, you know, just in a remote studio in the middle of Bedfordshire or something like that, and I can be stuck there for 16 hours at a stretch, and I'm well away from any contact. And in any case, I'm working, so I'm not trading while I'm working. So I just need to manage my time.
But also, you've mentioned about those periods that you do come across where you haven't got any work for a month or so.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, last year we had a few things cancelled, and I found myself coming back from a big job in the north of England, and I arrived back home and I looked at my diary, and the next booking was a month away, 4 weeks. So I said to my wife, well, I'm going to drink a lot of tea in the next 3 or 4 weeks. But then I was able to sit down and, you know, perhaps 2 or 3 days a week, actually just sit and concentrate on the charts and look at stuff and try and absorb more stuff. So I see that as a positive. I mean, obviously it's not great for the bank balance if you're not earning money, but I saw it as a positive for learning something. So I try and make those opportunities work.
100%. But the nice thing is, because you're used to that and you know that trading income, you don't make 5% every month or a certain amount each and every month like you might do in a traditional working environment where you get a paycheck at the end of the month. You're used to the fact that your paychecks vary during the course of the year, just like trading will do, trading returns.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know, it is not quite feast or famine. I mean, we tend to be a bit more even than that. But you literally can do a month where you almost continuously working, and then you come home to the office and you sit down and you start doing the invoicing, and you think, wow, this is, you know, enormous amounts of work I've done here. And then you can do, conversely, you can do another month where you've hardly worked at all. And so, you know, you're sitting thinking, well, there's not a lot coming in. And it does ebb and flow. It all has to even out, of course, in the end. From a business point of view. But it's certainly like trading as well, because, you know, you can have a good few trades and you can then be in a really down spot. I have been for the last 2 or 3 weeks, actually. You know, not a great place to be.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because you said that you focus just on a couple of different markets, don't you?
Yeah, euro dollar and a little bit of Aussie dollar and a little bit of dollar yen. Right. And that's pretty much it. I don't go near the Canadian dollar at all, mainly because I haven't been bothered to sort of look into it enough. And I think I want to understand the market before I'm in it. And if it's a market I don't understand, then I try and keep out of it.
And so, okay, so you focus on a few markets, and that will transfer across sometimes when, like you've just said, the last 3 or 4 weeks have been pretty flat for you. That's no surprise, because we're sitting here in late February 2019, and the euro dollar, for example, has been pretty range bound over the last few months. So, so that's going to be a reflection. It's going to reflect on your P&L as well. But that's fine, because when they do trend, then they work well for you. So, the charts themselves you've just talked about. You have a bias, don't you?
Oh God, yes, I do. My bias is up. I find it very difficult to go short in a market, and I don't know why that is, but it just seems to be me. I seem to see upward movement easier than downward movement, and I realise that that's something I should really work on and be better at. But I'm getting there, I hope.
With the charts that I use, as you know, I have the ability literally turn a chart upside down, just press a button and the chart inverts. Because I have the same issue as you, that sometimes your eyes are good at noticing certain types of patterns, if you will, but they're not good at others, longs or shorts. And so I've always found that a useful thing. But some people literally just turn their heads and...
yeah, I'm afraid I'm probably a bit beyond doing handstands in the office now. But maybe I've got a rotating monitor, so maybe I should just do that a bit more.
Okay, so talking about your trading then, what highlights and can you pick out over the last 2-3 years to say, okay, that was a learning point there, or that was an interesting point there, that period?
Well, I think we were talking about this earlier, and I think one of the most interesting things for me is that last year, the back end of the previous year and much of the beginning of last year, we were undertaking a huge rebuilding project at home. And literally, my wife and I lived in a single room upstairs for 6 months with a kettle and a cat. And I had no office, we had no real much of anything. I had a laptop, I had my iPad, and I could look at the odd chart, and that was it. And I scaled everything right back because I knew I couldn't get into really complicated stuff because I didn't have the facilities to do it. So I used to get up in the morning and I was working really, really small position sizes, and I would just look at the charts and just think, yeah, I think that looks like something I would like to be in. And I'd put on a really tiny trade and I would forget about it. And that 2 or 3 months that was going on was one of the most successful periods I've had, actually, both in terms of P&L, which it definitely was, but also in terms of the fact that I felt so relaxed about it because I wasn't worried about it because they were so small relative to what I was. And I found that really interesting because it was the psychology kicking in, which we all know about this, but you don't really experience it. When you experience it, you know what it is. And suddenly I realised that, of course, I wasn't worried because I was risking almost nothing. But yet the trades were working more often than not.
Partly because the risk is, like as you've already said, so small, but maybe stops might have been a bit wider than before, because when we trade bigger, they tend to be...
Definitely, that was definitely a case. I was using wider stops, big difference. So it's a really an interesting learning experience.
You don't strangle the trade quite as much as you might do if there's more money on the line.
And the other interesting thing is that it was probably around then that I decided that I was probably by inclination a swing trader, a little bit more, not so much. I mean, I love day trading is where I get my information, but I tend to, when I get into a trade, I tend to be in it for a bit longer. So I will not be too worried about being flat at the end of the day.
So what do you look for then? You're in a trade, might be on a swing basis or whatever. What are the sorts of things that you might be looking for as far as, when are you going to take profits? How do you go about riding a trend? What do you do?
I always look back to the longer time frames. That's my thing. I always start off with the daily, sometimes even the weekly, actually, but usually the daily. And the first thing I'll look at is the daily. And I try and see where the trend is, and then I will look to see if there's a place to get in. If I think I'm going to go long on this instrument, I'll look at the shorter time frames to find a place to get the entry, and that will often be on a pullback because I want to try and maximise the number of pips I can get out of the trade. And then when I'm in the trade, for profit or for take profit positions, what I'll normally do is I'll then look back along the chart and see where the major points of resistance are above where I was. I will always have had an idea where that's going to be anyway. Yep. So I'll look at a previous high, for example, and I'll probably set my initial profit target about a third of the way lower than that, so that I'm not quite at the top of the previous high, but I'm thinking my aim point is there, and then if I take half profits there, and if it carries on going, then that's great. But if it doesn't, I've already locked in some profit.
Perfect.
So the other thing I do is I use a very small little routine on my MT4 chart, which automatically sets a stop when I put the trade on. And that I found really, really useful. I mean, there are a variety of different versions of it you can get, but it's not that the stop is where I want it to be, but it's always there. So as soon as I press the button, I've protected myself without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then I can go and think about where I really want to put the stop, and then I move it to where I want it. But that I found really useful. It's a very good little discipline thing.
Great little tips there, but unfortunately, we're out of time.
Oh.
I know, I've got more questions for you, but I've got them saying in my ear where we're at. So,
never mind.
Cliff, thanks ever so much for coming on and agreeing to be interviewed today. I'm sure there's been some great little tips there for our viewers. And that's all we have time for today. My name's Charlie Burton. Trade safely out there.